Happy Monday, and welcome back to Uncle Gobb and the Dread Shed. We are up to chapter 17. Chapter 17. Uncle Gobb's interesting scheme. Malcolm finished his toast on beans. I know he's already finished his beans once. What I mean is that we're still with him exactly as he finishes his beans. Then, as part of Uncle Gobb's interesting scheme, he barked questions at Malcolm. Like this. What's 4 plus 4? Where's Egypt? Where does the equator end? Who was the President of the United States of America? When's tea time? Are we? Who is? Can it? It was Malcolm's job to fire back the answers. The trouble was that some of the questions didn't make sense, and so Uncle Gobb got sadder and sadder and angrier and redder until in the end everyone was very upset. When Uncle Gobb asked who was the President of the United States, Malcolm said, "When?" And Uncle Gobb shouted at him, "I'm asking the questions round here!" Which didn't help. So Mum said, "Derek, be a dear. Just think up some other way of doing questions, eh?" "All right then," said Uncle Gobb. "Here is my new way of doing questions. If there is anything, Malcolm, you don't know the answer to, ask me." Malcolm thought for a bit and then said, "Is there anything lighter than light?" Uncle Gobb said, "That's a very good question, boy. That's an excellent question. I like that question. It's a question that is very interesting and mind-consuming. It's one of the best questions I've ever heard in all of my life. And I've been to China." Aha, thought Malcolm. There are times when Uncle Gobb isn't the most annoying, boring person in the world. He is the most stuck person in the world. "All right then," said Uncle Gobb. "The best way to do questions is for me to think of a question. I then get you to ask me that very same question, and then I will answer it. So, my boy, supposing you wanted to know what fuel is burned in an internal combustion engine. You say to me, what fuel is burned in the internal combustion engine? Off you go then." Malcolm left the room. Uncle Gobb shouted after him, No, come back. I didn't mean off you go. I meant ask the question." Malcolm said, "OK." This is how it went after that. Uncle Gobb, who won the men's 100 metres at the 2012 Olympics? Would be an interesting question, Malcolm. Malcolm, Uncle Gobb, who won the men's 100 metres at the 1912 Olympics? Uncle Gobb, 2012. Malcolm, oh, that's interesting. 2012 won the men's 100 metres at the 1912 Olympics, eh? Uncle Gobb, the question I suggested you ask was, who won the men's 100 metres at the 2012 Olympics? Malcolm, oh, right. But while we're on 1912, who did win the men's 100 metres at the 1912 Olympics? Uncle Gobb, shouting, I have no idea. I don't even know if there was an Olympics in 1912. We're not talking about 1912. Malcolm, no, I know you're not, but I am. But if you don't know the answer to the question, then I'm not really learning anything. You might be wondering at this moment if Malcolm was saying these things to annoy Uncle Gobb. I certainly am. Uncle Gobb, but if you asked me the question about the 2012 Olympics, you would learn something for a change. Malcolm, but I know who won the men's 100 metres at the 2012 Olympic Games. It was Usain Bolt. Uncle Gobb, shouting, You really don't get it, do you? I'm trying to teach you something here. I'm trying to teach you how to ask questions. I'm trying to teach you some really interesting answers, and you muck the whole thing up. We're falling behind, boy. And I've been to China! This explains why, back in chapter 16, Uncle Gobb shouted, Wrong! He was imagining that he had asked Malcolm to ask him that one key question that Russell with the nice teeth asked. And there was the right answer: Rome. But in fact, Malcolm was going to ask him, why did it say Gobb Education on the bottom of the Getting On Well chart and the worksheet chart and the Behaving Sensibly at Playtime chart? But just then, Mum came in and said, "Bed." Malcolm felt that he needed to share all this with Crackersnacker, but Crackersnacker wasn't there at that precise moment, which is a pity, Malcolm thought. So he was sad. Chapter 18. Bed. In bed, Malcolm brought into his mind all the times he had seen Gobb Education while he had been at school. The more he looked at them in his mind, the more the word Gobb seemed to blur and mix with Uncle Gobb's face. The next moment, Malcolm was in Binner Market with Crackersnacker. Binner was where Tess and Malcolm and Crackersnacker lived. You might be wondering why I didn't say Tess and Malcolm and Crackersnacker and Uncle Gobb. That's because on Uncle Gobb's little white address card that he handed out to people, it said, Uncle Gobb, care of the Cow Club, London. So Uncle Gobb didn't really think he belonged in Binner. He thought he belonged to the Cow Club. Back at Binner Market, Malcolm found that he and Crackersnacker were walking down the road looking at the stalls. There was the man who sold jeans, but today, how odd, he seemed to be selling a kind of doll's house model. "Come on," he shouted. "Let's see the colour of your money. Look at this one. Tasty or what?" Over there on another stall was the man who usually sold fresh veg. And today, like the jeans man, he was selling some kind of doll's house thing. Just one, sitting right in the middle of his stall, just where you'd expect to see his potatoes and carrots. You see? "Lovely jubbly," he shouted. And so it was across stall after stall, all of them selling just one doll's house thing. And then, in the middle of it all, was Uncle Gobb. Look at him. He was sitting in a chair that was on a platform which was being carried down the middle of the road by 4 very strong men. He nodded and smiled to everyone, and people looked up and nodded back at him. Every now and then he threw some money in the direction of the stallholders, but he didn't seem interested in buying anything. Malcolm and Crackersnacker followed after him, and it was then that Malcolm realised he was in a dream. The question is, though, he thought, am I in my dream, or am I in someone else's dream? If it's someone else's dream, whose dream? And if it's someone else's, how will I ever find out whose dream it is? While he was thinking this, he realised that he and Crackersnacker were getting closer and closer to the stall at the end of Binner Market. And to his surprise, now it was Uncle Gobb selling a doll's house too. But it wasn't a doll's house at all. It was his school. Janet and Mr. Keenley were crying and shouting, "No! No! No!" But Uncle Gobb was now laughing and nodding more and more and pointing in all directions at the same time. Crackersnacker whispered to Malcolm, "Quick, you've got to get rid of him. Do it now. Do some bamboozling and confuzzling." And then it all went blank.